All right. Let's talk about the hat. You guys want to talk about the hat? We'll talk about the hat. Spoiler alert for everyone that doesn't know the relevance of this hat. I mean, even more so than the relevance that the hat usually has in the One Piece story. This is honestly probably going to be more of a preliminary discussion about the damn hat, okay? Because the bombshell that Oda dropped in the last chapter, I don't even know if bombshell is the appropriate term to use, because we just don't know where it's going, okay? This isn't like, This is different from whenever Oda, has a cliffhanger at the end of a chapter. Like, remember back when Luffy went Snake Man against Katakuri, and at the end of the chapter, he's like, Snake Man! And then you had, like, the eyes go a little narrow, and it's like, ooh, wonder what it could be. But at least that was easier to theorize, because we already knew what Gear Forth was. It was something that was already established, so we could sit down and be like, alright, well, here's something it could be, and, it could also look like this, and, here it could also look like this. But what this, I don't know, man. Like, there's so many different roads you could take to travel. Not just roads, you could also take the canal, you could fly over, you could do a bunch of different routes to try to figure out what the hell this means. There's a giant straw hat underneath Marijois. Alright, so there's probably going to be more than one of these, but let's just get into the preliminary discussions. Let's go scene by scene. Let's start with that. So, first panel we have, well, honestly, even before this, we had the scene in Impel Down where Doflamingo was talking to Magellan about how there's assassins from up above that's going to try to come down into the depths of hell and kill him. Which, by the way, something else, just a side note, I didn't even think about this in the chapter, but who do you think the assassins are that are going to go assassinate Doflamingo? I wonder if the world government has some sort of top assassin branch that they might use, and it's probably going to be Lucci, so get ready for a Lucci on Doflamingo and Magellan fight. I mean, like, please, Oda, if you're going to have it be Lucci, go into, like, level 6 Impel Down, like, disguised as a guard or something. Don't skip over that. Even if it's just not even going to be Lucci and Doflamingo, even if it was just be like Lucci and Magellan, I still want to see that, like, a lot, so please don't skip over that. But you have Doflamingo down there talking about a great treasure in the Holy Land that he knows about, and they're probably going to send people to kill him to, silence him so he doesn't blab about it. And he's going on about how it involves power in some way, and that it should be revealed already. It doesn't really matter at this point. Maybe Doflamingo feels like they're nearing the end of this era anyway. He was talking all about the Throne Wars, how when the One Piece is discovered, it's going to create even a bigger war than what happened at Marineford, so who even cares at this point? So, we cut back to Marijois. This is the first panel we see. We see a shadowy figure. In this panel, we don't really get to see them all that much, but I'm literally going to go panel by panel here, because we have to pay attention to, like, every little detail. Carrying two wanted posters. One of them is obviously Luffy's wanted poster. The other one we don't know. We can only barely make out like one little fragment of the border on the name, but we don't get the name or the bounty or anything like that. Oda made it very clear that he doesn't want us to know what those are. Then we see this person descending a staircase into darkness. I originally actually thought that it was going upward, but it seems like he's going down into darkness from what we're going to get now. So, if we have the great castle Pangea in Marijois on top of the red line, perhaps this is further into the red line itself, like actually under the castle, because that castle takes up, like, the vast majority of the actual city of Marijois. Like, this castle is massive. So I would assume the dungeons of said castle would also be pretty massive. And lo and behold, the next scenes we get, we see the shadowy figure turning a vault door. Okay, so a giant vault-style door. Still don't really see much of this person. We see the cuffs a little bit there, but that's pretty much all we get. The next scene, we see this giant vault door opening, which kind of gives us scale, just to see how big that the freaking doors are compared to the person opening them. See this mysterious figure entering. Also, off to the sides of the doors, we can see a bunch of pipes and things. Probably some sort of device in order to keep this area refrigerated, because in the next panel to the left we see that this entire area is just covered in ice. It's actually more of a ruin area. So the way that I'm looking at this is you have Marijois, the Holy Land, and then there's like some sort of like undercity or ruins, because when you look at this, you don't immediately think like a castle dungeon. You think like a ruined city. Like, I'm looking at this and I'm thinking like the architecture of like ancient Greece or some shit, you know? Like, so it's possible that it could be something like that. Not like it's under the castle now, but at some point it might not have been. We don't know. Looking at the architecture on the walls, we see that there is a symbol here that looks a lot like a cross. And I was looking at a lot of different cross images because obviously there's a bunch. I mean, I didn't do a lot of research here because once again, we're going to get into this later on. But nothing that really strikes me as like an immediate reference to this. So I'm going to go and say that it's probably either the world government sigil, but it's a lot older than the world government sigil we know now, the typical one with like the 4 circles and then the 5th one in the center, you know. So this might be like an old school symbol of the world government. Or if we really are in some kind of like ruined city right now, this could very well be the symbol of that city. Like, what was in the area of Marijois before the world government, before the beginning of the Void Century? Who knows? Maybe nothing was there. Maybe another city was there. Maybe the Tenryubito and the people that founded the world government raided this place and then took over and then built Marijois on top of it. Maybe. Who knows? Get used to me saying the word maybe a lot. We're going to be getting that a lot too. All right, so that's the issue with that. All right, that's the vault door. Okay, moving on. This is a better view of the figure. And a few things to reference here that I've seen around, because this is something that's been discussed for a while. The general consensus now seems to be that this figure is in fact a woman. And there's a few different ways I've seen like why this is supported. The first one is just the very lanky appearance of the figure, and we're going to see that in the next panel a little bit more. You'll get to see a better view of them. But the very thin appearance and the tall crown, I don't know, this might strike a reference to like a Maleficent or something. I've heard that be compared to a lot. Now, I didn't immediately think that this figure was necessarily a woman or a male. I mean, I used male pronouns when discussing this character in the review, but because the weird way Oda draws a lot of characters, I mean, we've seen some pretty wacky designs throughout the One Piece manga. So, Oda drawing an extremely lanky dude is just as likely as him drawing an extremely lanky woman. But the other thing that people bring up, 2 other things actually. One is that the figure seems to be wearing some type of veil. I've seen this been likened to like a morning gown or a morning dress or something like that. And so this might actually lean credence to something that I brought up in the review where this is a tomb. This is a tomb, and the reason why it's refrigerated and frozen is to preserve the body of somebody. So that's something else. Once again, it might not be, but yeah, that's the case. I also heard somebody saying the lips, you can kind of make out the lips of this, and I'll try to enlarge it here. And I think it's one of those things that's like a optical illusion, because in some way you could look at this and say, right here, these are the lips of the figure. Another way of viewing it is that that's just the exhaled breath. We don't get to see the mouth at all. This is just, Oda just went out of his way to show the exhaled breath of the person, to show that it's cold in here. And now we get to the point where I realize that I'm literally breaking down and analyzing a scene where a character's mouth might be kind of shown. And because the lips might be a little bit more full, therefore it's a woman. So as for the gender right now, I mean, I guess I would be leaning toward a woman, but not because of the lip thing, more because of like, yeah, the thin appearance and the veil that they're wearing might be more indicative of a woman wearing some type of mourning garb, but I'm not 100% sold yet. And once again, I don't think the gender of this person's really gonna matter in the grand scheme of things, but something I did mention in the review was that this character might very well be, like the king of the entire world, because we know that the Tenryubito are the world nobles, and they might not necessarily have like a straight up king, but there might be like the head of the family, you know what I mean? Like the oldest Tenryubito, the one that has been around the longest, and might not be referred to as king or queen, but might just have like a special status. Because the Tenryubito kind of make a group in and of themselves. We don't know how many Tenryubito there are, but we know quite a few of them, you know, like probably at least, I don't want to say a dozen, I don't think we know that many, but we know the original 3 that got, that were introduced at Sabaody. We know Charlos, we know Roswald, I forget the name of the girl, during, the backstory between Luffy and Ace and Sabo at the Goa Kingdom, we had Jalmac. There was another one that was introduced during the Fishman Island flashback with Otohime. I think there was another, few we've seen scattered around. There were the ones that we saw during Doflamingo's flashback. So, I honestly, I think maybe about a dozen or more we've seen so far around that number. That would probably be appropriate. But how many really are there? And if, like, let's say there's a good, because there's a decent collection of them, you'd figure, maybe at least 20 or 30 members of the Tenryubito, maybe even more than that, there would probably be, like, a matriarch or a patriarch of that particular family. So that figure could very well be that person. And also you gotta figure, this is a secret vault that is located underneath Marijois, most likely. We see a lot of really ancient symbols and ruins down there. Obviously, this is a really important place that only, like, the VVIPs can enter. You know, this is not a place where probably just any Marine soldier could walk into. This is not a place where probably even normal nobility, like Vivi or, like Cobra or Riku could just walk into. This is probably not even a place where government officials like the CPs could even enter. This is probably an isolated area, most likely where only the Tenryubito, or hell, maybe even a select few of the Tenryubito could even enter, or might even know the location. So, I think one thing that everybody can kind of agree on right out of the gate before we even get into this is that that figure right there is one of the most, prestigious, noble people in all of Marijois. I think that's something we can all agree on, and I think that's one of the reasons why Oda made sure to keep this figure completely in silhouette. Only the crown and just the little ruffles of their clothing could really, we could really make out there. So I think that's something most people have come to a consensus on. Alright. So, with that being said, now let's get to the important part, alright? So, this figure is approaching a series of alcoves that are in the wall. And only one of these alcoves is lit up. We don't know how it's lit up, but we've seen the pipes and things refrigerating the place, so maybe, I want to say maybe Vegapunk is involved here. But even him, I don't see him maybe getting a permission to enter such a prestigious location. So, maybe this is more ancient technology that's been around for a while. I'm not going to get too much into where the light is coming from. It might just be the light. Maybe there's like a series of like tunnels that like the sun leads. I don't know. Let's not get into freaking light bulbs, okay? Let's just, he's entering this area. There's a bunch of alcoves. There's one alcove that's lit up. He goes to that one, and then lo and behold, the object that is illuminated under the light in this one particular alcove is a giant straw hat. We know it's a giant straw hat compared to the wanted posters and the figure themselves, and so that's where that particular chapter ends. Now, the way that I took this is that this is a tomb. That's like a sarcophagus. Now, I didn't really pick this out at first when I reviewed it, but that alcove is pretty much like this. You know, it's just kind of like more, think of it more like a shelf that's like presenting this. And in this one little, area right here, it looks like it's a sliding stone, like a piece of stone that's on top of this that you could, lift up or slide off. And then that's where I got the idea that it was a straight up sarcophagus. But that's not really the way that sarcophaguses are usually built, because, it would be like an altar sort of thing that you could just slide off. This is like surrounding by walls. Now, that still doesn't make it impossible for that's what it could be. I mean, you could always just lift it up directly or just slide it off. I mean, there's probably ways that you could do this. I mean, they're in a giant freezer right now, so they have some sort of technology. So it's not what you would expect when you look at a typical sarcophagus, but it's still something that's still what it could be, okay? Now, let's talk about the actual Straw Hat, all right? Because there's basically two lines of thinking here. There's the one that the Straw Hat is, it's always been something that's important in the One Piece world. I did a whole video about that. And at this point, I feel like I should also bring up, because this is something that I was reading up on, and there's a website called the Library of Ohara. I'll throw the URL in the description below, and I don't know how long they've been doing this. I really only picked up on this the last few chapters, but there's a person by the name of Artor, and that person does extremely in-depth overviews of the entire chapter of One Piece. Like, it's text only. Like, they just break down the text and you can go and read them. But if you want like an absolute like never miss anything, scans every little aspect of a panel for any sort of semblances to anything we've previously seen in the One Piece franchise, go check out the Library of Ohara and Artor's analysis, all right? Because they do more things than I could ever hope to even look. Like, this is like next level. This is like, they'll analyze the speech patterns of certain characters and how they might differ. Like, usually this character only uses this speech pattern, but in this panel, this other character uses it, and here's the significance behind that. Here's all the different characters in the background that we see and how they might be relevant, comparing this person's clothing to this person's clothing. Like, it's really intense stuff, and I don't always get a chance to read them before the reviews, and sometimes I actually avoid reading them before the reviews because I don't want to be like, oh, I read this and now I'm gonna have stuff to pass off as my idea. I don't like to do that. So but I had to reread this just to get an idea for what other people are thinking, because I don't want to go this into just a perspective of just here's my idea and nobody else's. But yeah, this is definitely a big help for when I was making this video. So shout out to that website and shout out to Artor. All right, go check their stuff out. All right, it's pretty cool. Okay, so the Straw Hat, symbolically, I think we can all agree, is something very relevant in the One Piece world. It's been around for a while. You had Roger having this hat, and then it passed down to Shanks, and then passed down to Luffy. The hat is usually, I put it in the way that the video I made, I put it that this hat is a symbol of dreams and a never-ending will. The will of D, to be specific. How even though the bearer of this hat, the wearer, like Roger, might die, the will carries on more. It's like just a symbol of that. And so that's one way you could still view it, and that's the way I took it in the review, whereas perhaps this hat, that the one that we see in the chapter, not Luffy's hat, because this one is obviously much larger, was owned by the original bearer of the will of D, possibly Joy Boy. And then after Joy Boy died, that's the body that's being kept in this tomb, if it really is a tomb. And then they kind of just like, like Joy Boy is dead, bury his body, and we will set the straw hat, kind of like you would set like a bouquet of flowers on top of a coffin. Kind of the same thing here, like this is the memorial. Like if Zoro were to ever die and be buried, what would you put on top of Zoro's coffin? Obviously like his swords and his bandana. That would be like indicative of his character, right? So kind of the same thing there. Now, there's another school of thought that thinks, no, it's not a tomb. It's literally just a shrine to the Straw Hat, and the reason the place is kept refrigerated is to preserve the hat so it doesn't decay, because the hat itself is something that's extremely powerful and important. And this is where we get into a bunch of different discussions. The Straw Hat is really the ancient weapon Uranos. Wait, no. The Straw Hat really has the power of a devil fruit. Maybe all the devil fruits originated from the hat. That's the kind of stuff we're getting into here. Like I said, it's almost like a challenge that Oda is presenting. Like, hey guys, try to figure this out. Person who figures it out first gets a cookie and my admiration. Like, all right, Oda, you're on, you sly bastard. Personally, just from my end of the spectrum, I don't think the hat is in and of itself like an ancient weapon. I don't think the hat is going to be like having a devil fruit ability. For one thing, the whole objects eating devil fruit thing, that was something that we're led to believe that Vegapunk came up with recently. That wasn't something that was been around for a while. I mean, maybe it was. Maybe the technology, maybe the knowledge of devil fruits and stuff existed back in the day, and then it was just forgotten, and then Vegapunk came up with it again. Who knows? There's been theories that, like, the Straw Hat does have a devil fruit, and the devil fruit itself is the precursor to all devil fruits, because I know a lot of people want to know about where the origin of all devil fruits came from. There has to be a beginning stage of this, because we're led to believe at the beginning of the series that the devil fruits are some kind of mysterious, ancient thing or there's like magic, basically. It's like magical fruits that just have always existed, but from the research that Vegapunk has done, perhaps not. Perhaps they're not some sort of like, tens of millions of years old kind of magic that's already been around. Maybe they were only around since the Void Century. All the information from the Void Century was purged, so therefore, that's the reason why we just don't know. But in reality, their origin is something that can be discovered, and it's like scientifically based or something. It's like maybe something natural. Now, here's something else. Why would the world government keep this stuff around? Well, here's an idea. The Void Century, right? Obviously, they had to purge all the information of the Void Century from, like, the public eye. So, like, that's one of the reasons why Ohara had to be Buster called, right? Would it make sense for the Tenryubito, the world government, for them to keep copies of everything so that they would know about it? I'm not talking everybody, and they would have to obviously keep this stuff under wraps. So once again, we might only be talking about, like, the upper echelon of the Tenryubito and possibly the Gorosei. Because I feel like the Gorosei, they know the whole story. They know everything. Obviously, they would keep it because they might not want to forget. They might not want to make sure that the Void Century is just forgotten. In fact, they would probably have to make sure that they would know, because that way they would know if other people knew. Like when Clover was talking about the Ancient Kingdom to the Gorosei, and he's like, oh crap, yeah, he's onto us. He's talking about the stuff that we know about. So, obviously, they would have to keep fragments of the Void Century around, but they would have to make sure to keep it under lock and key above all else. So that's what this vault could be. Probably the only thing that we saw in this chapter was the Straw Hat, but those other alcoves, other locations in the vault might have, like, there might be a library down there. There might be something that was hidden in the Red Line that, these are artifacts and records from the Void Century that are kept in the most secure location in the entire world. There's only like 8 people that are allowed to enter this vault, period. Maybe like the Gorosei and like some really top-ranking Tenryubito, and that is it. And then this is how we find out what happened in the Void Century, so that we know if someone else is getting close to the truth, we know how to silence them. Something like that. With that being said, the Straw Hat is just one of those relics. I do believe that the Straw Hat that we saw in this chapter is the Straw Hat that is owned by the original bearer of the Will of D. It would make perfect sense. Roger and Luffy both have the Will of D. They wear the hat. Shanks probably has the Will of D too. So, yeah, he's Ret D Hair Shanks, he most likely has it. Let's be honest here. So if they're all bearers of the Will of D and they wore this hat, and then, yeah, maybe it's just a thing where Roger he found out about it, or maybe it's not even like Roger found out about the bearer of the Will of D wore the hat and then he wore the hat too. Maybe it's just like some sort of like spiritual thing where Roger, he caused a lot of ruckus in the world, he caused a lot of panic, and so he just had the hat just because he felt like it suited him. He didn't even know. Maybe later on, when they found out the truth about the Void Century on Raftel and everything, read the Rio Poneglyph, he found out about it then, but this was already, by the time Roger arrived on Raftel, he'd already given up his hat. He'd already passed that down to Shanks, so he obviously didn't know about it when he got the hat when he was a younger man, like we saw in the flashback with Rayleigh. So, yeah, it might just be like the spirit of Joy Boy, if that was really the bearer of the Will of D, like the original bearer, or if it not, then somebody else. The spirit of this person lives on, and everybody that causes a ruckus in the world, they always end up wearing this hat. Even if they don't even know the significance of the hat, they always end up wearing the damn hat. Yeah. Now, let me talk about this, because let's just assume that it is a tomb. Let's assume that it's some sort of like a coffin preserving a body. That's the reason it's kept secret. And I touched upon this in the review, but I didn't go far enough with it, okay? I mentioned in the review, hey, this is kind of interesting, because Moria had the Shadow fruit, being able to resurrect corpses. And yeah, the corpses that are resurrected, they move around with the personality of the shadow that animated them, but they still retain the memories from they were alive. So, for instance, Ryuma was reanimated using Brook's shadow. He spoke in Brook's, like, voice and his, like, pronunciation, like, he did his yo-ho-ho-ho and everything, and he moved around and he fought like Brook, but the memories were still Ryuma's memories. So that's the thing you gotta keep in mind here. I didn't even think about this, but remember at the end of Marineford when the Gorosei, or the Tenryubito possibly, ordered Doflamingo to kill Moria? That might have been the moment where they were either trying to capture the Shadow fruit to use it on that body, or at the very least, make sure the Shadow fruit doesn't fall out of their hands. Because Moria was kind of a... He was kind of a failure, and so that's probably part of the reason why Doflamingo was ordered to kill him, but also, like, that's a pretty strong devil fruit that can reanimate the freaking dead, you know, with all their memories intact. Oh, that's not good. If somebody gets their hands on that fruit, reanimates somebody that's from the Void Century, and they tell their story, that's another way they could find out, and that's not good. So, maybe if Doflamingo succeeded in killing Moria back then, got the devil fruit, the Shadow fruit, and then the world government used that, maybe they would have reanimated the corpse, or maybe they would have at least kept it in the vault next to it so nobody could use it. But of course, that's not the situation. Doflamingo could not end up killing Moria because Absalom was there. Absalom used the clear fruit to turn Moria invincible and kind of get him out of Marineford without being killed. Seriously injured, but not killed. So, you know. That's another possibility, right? If it is a corpse, then it might be resurrected. Or is the corpse still alive? Because that's another thing. Like, maybe the corpse is not a corpse. Maybe the body of Joy Boy is still alive. They couldn't kill it. Maybe it's immortal in some way. I've heard the whole ageless surgery thing from the Opi no Mi thrown around here. But the way I understand about the ageless surgery is it just gives you eternal youth. It doesn't make you indestructible and immortal. You know what I mean? Like, indestructible and eternal youth are two different things. Like, yeah, eternal youth, you'll live forever and you'll be eternally young unless you, like, shoot yourself in the face or something. Then you'll die. So, I don't think that's the case. But let's say, like, the body is something unique, something special that cannot die. They're like, all right, we won't kill you, because we can't, but we can, like, maybe knock you out and then freeze you and then lock you in this tomb where you can never escape. So that's another way of viewing the vault. Maybe it's not so much, making sure people can't come in, although I'm sure that's a concern, but also making sure somebody can't get out. So that's something else. So those are just a few of the ideas that I've seen being thrown around on the interwebs as of late. Revolving around the Straw Hat, revolving around the vault, the shadowy figure, who this character is, what it's all going on about. It's one of those things where Oda really just kind of like, alright, I'm gonna give you just a glimpse of, like, the story about, like, the Will of D and the Void Century. Like, this is a hint relating to it, but Oda's also like, I'm not going to expand upon this for a while. So don't think that next chapter we're going to even see this scene anymore, because we're probably not. Odds are most excellent we're not. So don't get too excited on that front, but Oda is, like, giving us, like, the breadcrumb trail of clues. Like, here is this scene, try to figure it out, make of it what you will. I'm Oda, everybody. Have fun. I know what's gonna happen, but let's see if you can figure it out. Maybe that is a challenge. I joked about that earlier, but maybe that is a challenge. Like, Oda wants to see, like, if anybody could actually figure it out. You know? Like, because the thing is with the internet, you have, like, thousands, possibly millions of people all working toward a solution at the same time, so it's kind of hard to make something surprising, you know? Like, I remember reading Naruto, and, like, the big discussion for so long was, who is Toby? Who is this masked character that claims to be Madara but isn't actually Madara? And by the time it was revealed that it was Obito, spoilers, it happened, like, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, we found out who Obito is, Toby. But even before that, for a long time, we knew exactly. It was like, oh yeah, it's Obito. Everything lines up. It's freaking Obito. So, yeah, I'm kind of afraid that might happen. I really hope that whatever spin that Oda has on the Void Century and on the One Piece and on, like, the Will of D and everything, I hope that, like, in the weeks leading up to it, he doesn't drop so many clues that the entire internet can work together and piece this together. Like, okay, we know exactly how this is all going to play out. And then when Oda releases the actual chapter revealing everything, it plays out exactly how the theories work. I really hope that's not the case. So we'll see where this goes. There'll be more videos about this to follow this one, so don't worry. Thanks for watching, everybody. Tekking101 signing out. This is Reginald, by the way. He is my pig.